My name is Dorian Smith, and after getting a degree in journalism, I worked for 10 years on newspapers, daily and weekly newspapers. And then I got a job working for the Department of Natural Resources. And for about 13 years, I compiled and edited the Washington Mill Survey and also the Timber Harvest Report. I have since retired, and after retiring, then I went to work for last couple of years with the University of Montana, where I collected data for some of the forest products reports from the university. And then also I have been contributing articles to Northwest Woodlands. This presentation is based on recent articles that appeared in Northwest Woodlands newsletter about how owners of small forest farms can earn and increase their income. I'll start with a short 10-minute background overview, then turn over the presentation to Dan Kingsbury, who owns the Five Springs Tree Farm in Olalla in Kitsap County. You can download a copy of this report for small forest landowners from the University of Washington's School of Environmental and Forest Sciences. It includes more than 400 pages of data and reports and a few statistics and maps that were used in this presentation. Wood products was once the largest industry in Washington's economy, but since Boeing, Microsoft, and Amazon, it is now only about 1 to 2% of the state's total revenue. And small forest farms are an even smaller share, but smaller does not mean insignificant. Washington has more than 19 million forested acres. This map shows the distribution of more than 3 million acres of small forest farms. Small forest farmers own about 15% of the total forest areas. This page shows the distribution of all forest parcels for all ownerships, including private, industrial, federal, state, national parks, and others. Small forest farms are the dark brown markers. This close-up of the previous map shows that small forest farms are not limited to rural regions. They are prominent in some of the heaviest population areas of Puget Sound, and it can be argued that those population areas benefit from the nearby forests. These aren't parks or conservation areas, but hundreds of private forests that contribute to Washington's reputation as the evergreen state. This 2017 Timber Harvest Report uses data collected by the state's Department of Revenue. The bottom line shows the total timber harvest was about 2.8 billion board feet, and more than 400 million board feet came from small private ownerships. That is about 15% of the state's total. DNR's 2016 mill survey shows that small forest owners contributed more than 13% of the timber that was processed by Washington's mills. Now, these may seem like small percentages, but the state's wood products industry now employs 25,000 workers who earn $1.6 billion in wages in 2019. So even a small percentage can have a considerable economic impact. And the impact is also felt by the large mills that produce lumber and plywood. These mills largely rely on corporate forests for the bulk of their log inventory, but I recently asked managers for a half a dozen large mills if they were willing to buy small loads from small forest farms, often just one truckload. And even though these mills unload dozens of semi-truckloads every day, they were all eager to buy from small forest farms. One log buyer said, "We will buy everything, even a single piece of wood." A log exporter said, "Sometimes the best stuff I find is in small loads." And an official at a large hardwood mill said simply, "We need those guys." This aerial photo was provided by Northwest Hardwoods in Centralia. The staff reported that in recent years, 15% of their total timber was purchased from small landowners. Log buyers for mills regularly visit small forest farms, and they often bid on their standing timber. They also encourage small forest farms by offering various services, such as loading equipment or recommending forestry business consultants. Small forest farms can be described as the entrepreneurs or small businesses of the wood products industry. They provide critical support for the productivity of large corporations, as in other business sectors. For instance, U.S. automakers depend on the parts manufactured by 1,700 small businesses to build their cars. According to the Small Business Administration, small businesses produce just under half of the U.S. GDP. They employ nearly half of all workers. And in fact, 1 out of 6 are employed by businesses with fewer than 20 workers. Even though small forest farmers are reassured they can sell to large mills, they often can't compete against the low prices of industrial forests. So some small forest owners abandon the commodity lumber business and look for higher value products. These include hardwood floors, wall decor, and long boardroom tables. And in recent years, even firewood from scrap wood has emerged as a profitable source of revenue. Small forest farmers today are earning $10,000 or more a year, that's per farm, selling firewood. And one group of 10 small forest landowners in Northern Oregon grossed about $200,000 last year, selling bundled firewood to neighborhood convenience stores. And if there's any doubt that firewood is in high demand, look at this close-up of a product tag from a Tacoma Home Depot store. The bundled firewood was shipped from Latvia, halfway around the world. And at $10 per cubic foot, it was being sold for more than $1,200 per cord. Some small forest farms also focus on non-timber forest products, also called specialty forest products, such as salal, mushrooms, and Christmas boughs. Those products annually add tens of millions of dollars in revenue from small forests. Some of you may know Herman Nelson. He planted these stunted white pine and cedar trees around his home near Shelton. He keeps them under 11 feet in height so the boughs can be more easily cropped. Herman strongly advocates special forest products, not only because the market is largely untapped, but they generate revenue every single year. He says he collectively earns more selling Christmas boughs every year than the same trees would bring in after waiting 30 years before harvesting for lumber. But the king of revenues in special forest products in Washington is salal, a forest shrub that is popular as a holiday greenery. Every year, Herman hires dozens of pickers who harvest and prune salal on 100 acres that he owns near his home. And I was told by the manager of a large wood products processing facility that Mason County alone generates at least $10 million in sales per year from salal. Washington-grown salal is sold across the U.S., but it is more valuable as an export product. All of these boxes were shipped to Denmark. There are also new public policies that are encouraging more forest economic activity. Several decades ago, the U.S. Forest Service largely shut down the federal forests over broad public concern about overharvesting. But recently, the Forest Service brought this policy into balance. Vicki Christensen, the newly appointed chief of the Forest Service, appeared before Congress to advocate increasing timber harvest. And by the way, Vicki Christensen grew up and began her forestry career in Washington State. Press releases from the Forest Service explained that forest conditions on millions of acres are improved by removing hazardous fuels and other woody material. The work also provides local jobs and economic stability to nearby communities. Last year, the Forest Service sold more than 3.2 billion board feet of timber, the second highest level in 20 years. Small forest landowners understand the need to balance the opportunities of generating revenue with forest sustainability. And Dan Kingsbury is an example of this dedication to resource management. So I will stop talking statistics and economics and turn this presentation over to Dan.
I am Dan Kingsbury, Five Springs Tree Farm. As Elaine said, we're past Tree Farmers of the Year. We did host the 2019 field tour. So if any of you were on that tour, you've been to our farm, you've seen my little operation, my logging and things that I do. And I want to thank Dorian for all the work he's done and for introducing us today to this whole thing and some really good statistics and details that he shared. Dorian has done contribution articles, I think 3 times now, to the Northwest Woodlands magazine. And hopefully all of us that are members of the Washington Farm Forestry Association get that magazine and read it and enjoy it. And Dorian has talked about products today that he's featured in his articles in the past. The first article he wrote was on small sawmilling, and then he did a feature article just on the special forest products, the salal and boughs and things. And he had called me somewhere along the line to get some input on these opportunities for tree farmers to market their products. And my whole thing kind of centered around, well, you know, you can have a small sawmill or whatever, but for wood products, there's no reason why, if you want to do it yourself, why you can't just go ahead and just log your material and sell it just like anybody else does to the major mills. And Dorian thought that everything I had to say about that was worthy of another article. And so that leads us to where we are today. Dorian wrote a third article then that came out recently in the Northwest Woodlands, focusing on that subject of actually marketing wood products for small landowners. And so that's kind of what I'm going to focus on today, is that idea, because I do that myself. And I feel like maybe there is some lack of understanding or lack of a fear maybe that people have, that if they're going to just go and cut their own load of logs or whatever, that they wouldn't be able to market it, or they wouldn't really know how to go about marketing that. And it can be done. So that's what I'm going to be talking about now, mainly. So if you do own a small forest land and you are a do-it-yourselfer type and you're interested in cutting your own logs, we will assume that you have some basic equipment available. I use an old log skidder, but I have a small skidder, old skidder, and chainsaws, and that's how I do my work. Yet if you have that kind of equipment, a wheel tractor with a winch, or any basic way that you can move the logs, I'm assuming that, and I know there's other things leading up to actually cutting the timber. You have to have permits and all that kind of stuff. We're assuming that and saying, okay, we're ready to log and we want to cut our logs, but what do we do with them? And so Dorian has said it, and I've kind of said it already, but the major mills, the major log buyers of the area will certainly buy these logs. They understand the statistics that Dorian was talking about, where small landowners have a significant contribution of wood to the overall volume that the state uses every year. And they know that our wood is important, and they know that even every stick, every log is important, and they're willing to treat a small landowner doing it themselves just like they do their major loggers that are bringing the material in. The person to talk to at any given mill or facility is the log buyer. So, how do you get a hold of them? The basic fundamental, how do I go about this? You need to contact the log buyer of a facility and then discuss with them the material you have available, and they will help you through the process of log specifications, lengths and diameters and things that you need to cut. They'll make the deal with you for how much they'll pay you for the wood. And really, they offer up all kinds of help. They'll give you on the ground help. Sometimes the log buyers themselves will come out. They can refer you to professional forestry help. Dorian mentioned earlier, some of them now are even offering help with equipment leases and things to help you get your work done. So they want the wood. They're willing to work with you, even if you're just a small guy, to buy this wood. And I have some Western Washington examples here. And my information here is basically West Side information. But over the years that I've been doing this myself, logging on my property and marketing my wood, I've talked to log buyers and sold logs. I haven't sold logs to all the facilities, but I've at least been in talks with the wood buyers. And I'm just going to list the facilities and kind of discuss the kinds of materials they buy. Murphy Veneer in Elma and Rainier Veneer, which is at Graham. Those are companies that purchase a certain grade of Douglas fir logs, and they rotary peel those for plywood manufacturing for the veneer. I have talked to and sold to Stella Jones McFarland Cascade pole buyer at Rochester, Washington. They buy, again, a certain grade, a certain product of Douglas fir and Western red cedar for utility poles. Mankey Company, which is in Tacoma, and they have a mill at Sumner. Sold material to them. They are kind of one of our local, what we call chip and saw or stud log buyers. And so they buy the small diameter, the very small logs that they'll produce, 2x4 and small dimension lumber out of. They also, at their Sumner facility, at times are buying larger logs, and depending on what you have available, they will, through the log buyer, make deals to buy the larger logs at Sumner. I have dealt with Cascade Hardwoods. I believe that's the same facility that Dorian had a picture of that's now called Northwest Hardwoods. It's down at Centralia, Washington, and I've sold alder to them. Sierra Pacific Industries in Shelton is a domestic local log buyer of Douglas fir and hemlock. And I have talked to them, made deals with them, but never actually ever sent a load to them. But they're very easy to talk to. It's a good facility. Be very easy to sell material to them if you dealt with them. I have done export logs to Weyerhaeuser and through Forest Marketing Enterprises. They go by Foremark, and I use the facility at Frederickson, Washington. They also, Foremark buys quite a variety of material, so I can send mixed loads. I've often sent mixed loads to them with hemlock, white pine, cedar. They will buy alder, and if you got a single piece of alder or two or whatever, they'll buy almost anything mixed in to a load there. For pulp wood, smaller materials, I've sold to both North Mason Fiber and Belfair and Shearer Brothers in Shelton. This is the real, like your tops and your real junk wood that they buy, and they chip it for pulp chipping. That's another product. It's a low-end product, but it's another possibility for smaller material that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do much else with. So there's some examples. That's not all the facilities around, but that's examples of the facilities that I've dealt with and kind of the products that they'll buy. Again, I'll repeat that the way you get in touch with these people and the way you talk to them is through their log buyer. I have a list of the log buyers from almost all those facilities I just talked about. And at the end of this presentation, if I haven't been able to get my screen up, I will just tell you my contact info. And if anybody wants more information like that, guidance on how to get a hold of the log buyers or anything, I would be happy to help anyone that needs that. You can contact any one of the facilities just by their advertised, commercially available phone lines, and then ask to speak to the log buyer. And they will usually put you in touch with their log buyer just by calling into their offices. So again, these facilities want our small amounts of wood. They realize the contribution of tree farming and small amounts of wood to the overall volumes. They're easy to deal with, and they sincerely do appreciate the wood, and they have no problem buying it straight from the landowner, from any kind of effort to harvest it and bring it to them. Another question that comes up then, I guess, with this whole process is, okay, if you can cut the wood and you can sell the wood, how do you get it to them? You know, if you don't have a log truck, or you don't even have a loader, or you have no real way to move it. And for those that aren't familiar with the world of self-loading log trucks, that's the primary way to move this material. And again, if I had this thing working, I have pictures of 3 of the different trucks that I've used. There are several in the western side of the state. There's several of these self-loading log trucks that have an integral loader built on them that that will be able to come out and load the logs and haul the logs to a facility wherever it is that you want to sell the wood. Some of the actual mills, Manke's, I guess, is the example I'm thinking of, have their own self-loaders. You're selling the wood to Manke's, they'll send their own truck out to pick it up. If they will take it any way you can get it to them, if you can hand load it onto a car trailer, they'll take it. When I'm talking about pulp wood here in the past, I hand loaded 12-foot pieces of tops and just odd stuff onto my pickup truck for about a year and a half, and took many 1 to 2 ton loads down to North Mason Fiber. They would buy it, they would unload it with their loader right on site and pay me the ton rate that they were giving anyone else for literally for pickup truck loads of pulpwood. So the facilities will buy the wood any way you can get there, but primarily for full length logging and production, the self loader log trucks are the way to go. In our area, we have several, and the ones I've used. And again, if you want to contact me later, I can try and help you get in touch with these drivers if you need. But we have Burley Creek Trucking, which is local here in Kitsap County. I've used Bobby Pierce, also here in Kitsap County. He's the one I'm using most recently now. Frank Sweats Trucking in Graham. He has 2 trucks, and he travels over quite a distance. Mankey Company has their own trucks that they'll send out, as I said. So, and these are only a few that I know of that I've used. There are other trucks around, and maybe you've heard of them, or you can learn about them. Your log buyer, oftentimes at the facilities, will be able to give you information on local self-loading log trucks also that can help bring the material in. One other very viable way to move your own wood off your property is firewood. Dorian talked about that a little bit ago. He had some pictures about bundled, commercial grocery store type firewood. That's another product that I have cut regularly on our tree farm. Most all of my junk wood or lower end wood is made into firewood. I don't sell pulpwood anymore. I don't even sell chip and saw or stud wood anymore. So all of the material that's less than a peeler log or an export log or a saw log, I make into firewood because I have pretty good luck with that. It's been an ongoing success for me for many, many years, and it still is. But really, a chainsaw and a splitter, or a chainsaw and a maul, if you're brave enough, can do it. And again, it's a market that's wide open. Never had a problem selling a cord of wood. I feel like if you cut an honest quantity of wood and you charge a fair price for it, you'll always be able to sell the wood that you cut. It seems like it's kind of a grassroots thing that more and more people are enjoying, just burning firewood to heat their homes. And I've found over the last 30 years, I figured that the market would slowly fade away on firewood. And I've actually found it's increased slowly. I usually sell all my wood word of mouth from previous customers. And if I have to advertise, I can advertise and get plenty of business on it. So if you're willing, and that's a market for you, if you have small amounts of wood or you have small wood, certainly cutting and selling firewood is another good way to make a little bit of money off your property. So just to kind of summarize, conclude and summarize here, the point of my presentation was, if you're a small landowner, you have some basic equipment, and you have a desire to cut your own wood, you should not be afraid to go ahead and do that. You can cut it, and you can market it by talking to these log buyers at these various facilities, possibly cut some firewood, and make a few dollars yourself directly by doing it yourself on your property. And again, I'll repeat again, your best source of information and help with that is the log buyer at the facility that, any facility you think that you have wood that you can sell to, contact the log buyer. They'll help you through the process, understanding specifications of what they want to buy, and how to go about cutting the logs and getting them into them.
So Dan, there's a couple of questions in the chat, and then
Okay.
I think we can probably open it up to questions here. So the first one, I think you may have answered afterwards from Joe and Ann. It said, at which mills have a log truck with a self-loader? So if we can yard things to the road, we'd be able to sell it to the mill. It sounds like Mankey, but there were some other ones. And then how much of a road does this self-loader need?
Yeah. So that's a good question, and I did cover most of that. But the amount of road or space you need is a good question. So Mankey's is one that has their own self-loaders. I mentioned a couple others, and again, the log buyers at most of the mills can kind of point you in the direction of area self-loaders too, and they need very little room. I've actually had just what I call roadside landings, which are just a wide spot in the road where I can push the logs off the actual road far enough that the truck can pull up beside them. They just have to be able to pull up to the pile and then load the truck without any extra overhead interference. You got to look for limbs hanging and things that might get in the way of the loader. But if you have a fairly clear opening, it doesn't have to be any bigger than the log pile, and then room to get the truck up next to it, and they can load and haul from fairly small locations.
Did the road have to be rocked, or I'm just thinking about how close you have to get it to a rocked road.
Yeah. So typically the roads that they're going to want to drive on will be pickup truck passable, should I say? I'm speaking about thinking about my soil conditions on my tree farm, which is very rocky. And most cases, we have very little to no mud problems. So my roads do not require extra rock most often to get those trucks in. They can come in over a little bit of mud, standing water type conditions, and still get to the logs. If you have real muddy conditions, that could be a problem where you may have to bring in some rock prior to having the truck come in. But that would be something you could discuss with the driver when you call them to let them know, you call them, tell them what you have to haul and where you want it hauled. And if you think you have a problem with the road, you could discuss your roads with the driver, and then they could give input on whether they can get there or not and what you could do to make sure they can get there.
Okay. There was another question here from Janelle. Is there a minimum number of trees the mills are interested in? In other words, do I still need a certain volume in trees in order for them to be interested, or is it more about quality of wood, quantity?
Yeah. So quantity is the thing that's wide open, and I think that's the thing that kind of frightens people is they think, well, if I'm not delivering 40 loads a week or whatever, like the big logger guys, they don't want to even talk to me. And like Dorian said, he had one log buyer that he interviewed that told him he would buy a log if you want to get it to him. However you can get one log there, they would buy it if it meets their specs. So volume is absolutely wide open. They'll buy any amount of wood that you can get through their gates. Typically, that's going to be a log truck load. So, and I can't, how many logs are on a log truck? That depends on the log and the size and everything. But typically you're going to be wanting, the wood that I'm cutting right now on my property, it'll take 15 trees, 12 to 15 trees a load for mature Douglas fir that I'm cutting. And then there's bigger timber around. I don't have the biggest timber. So, but you need enough volume probably to fill a truck at least once in order to make it worthwhile.
When you listed the companies that you've actually talked with, they're not necessarily close to you. How far afield and is there a significant difference in price between somebody who's relatively close to you and somewhere where you have to haul it quite a distance? Does that seem to, what's been your experience, how that plays out?
Yeah, so the price that the truck will charge you for hauling it is based on mileage, and usually, and so the further away they cost by a certain amount. Most of those facilities that I discussed are within 50 miles of me. And I'm not an expert by any means, but I would think that's somewhere in that range is probably a maximum 50 or 80 miles. But if you're in an area where the market is further away than that, I wouldn't discourage looking into it anyway, because you still might be able to work with the driver, and depending on how much they're going to charge you, it might still be well worthwhile to do that. I see one that came up concerned about, is that a new one? We're concerned about ability to get seedlings. So I'm not, I guess I'll speak quickly on that and anybody can answer that, but there are several nurseries around. For my timber reprod, I typically use the State Webster Nursery, which is just south of Olympia. They put out, if you contact them, they'll send you their information. They typically start taking orders in September. And then the trees are available. They were a little late this year. I just got mine recently. I'm still working on planting some right now. But then they're made available later in the year whenever they get them prepared and ready for you. But that's a public, it's open to the public. If you get your order in, they will get you any small number, 50 or 100, I think, is the minimums, up to thousands, depending on how many you want. And there are some other nurseries around also. I see Ken Miller shared a question about permitting. When we're talking about these small amounts of logs, or one or two loads or whatever, and I mentioned early on that I was kind of gleaning over that whole permitting thing for this talk. Like, we're assuming you've already got your permit and you're ready to cut. But as far as I understand, Ken can correct me or help me, that any amount you cut, you will require a permit and a plan. Typically, that's through the DNR. There are local permitting sources, counties. The counties sometimes will allow like danger tree removal, that kind of thing, if it's around houses or structures. Typically for us, we go through the DNR, and it would require a permit for any amount of harvest. And that would be a process you'd have to go through in order to make that happen.
Dan, do you have a multi-year permit?
Right now I'm working on a 3-year. I've never done the 7-year. I have a regular 3-year on what I'm doing right now, and I'm going to use the whole thing for this little job I'm doing. So that's, if you want an example of how slow does somebody work and still be able to cut their logs, I'm going to end up cutting about 30 loads of logs and 150 cords of firewood, and it's going to take me a good full 3 years to get that whole thing done under that one permit.
So there are options to do the long-term permits, and you can cover, your whole property if you want. And I'm
Right.
assuming that allows you to pick and choose and take as much time as you need to do something like this. There are notification requirements, and I don't remember what they are. Do you?
I believe it's very simple. Once you have that 7-year permit in place, then when you are getting ready to do any kind of a harvest under that permission, then it's just it's a short form, a notification. It's an easy thing. It's what it sounds like. It's a simple, short notification thing saying, I'm going to now harvest whatever, plot B of my plan, or whatever it is that, however you've set it up. You just notify the DNR you're going to do that work, and then it's already pre-approved, so you just go about the business then.
So Ken, you're texting here. I think you could say a few things that might be useful to this crowd.
Okay, I think it's isn't it a 15-year permit? If you go that longer route, there's a whole bunch of hoops you have to jump through. But if you're that is one option. You can use the regular 3-year permit that Dan's talking about, but there's also a shortcut to get to 5 years if you want it. You apply for a template, fixed width template if you got any water at all, and same rules essentially, but and then you just ask for a 5-year permit, and they'll leave it open for five full years. But-
even though this wasn't the job, I used to work for DNR, and even though I didn't work in that department, but I do know that they have offices around the state, and they also have sort of sub offices. And if you call DNR in Olympia, I'm sure that if you told them where you are and where you're looking to get a forest practices permit, they'll be able to tell you where the closest office is, and they're very helpful in helping people to fill out those forms.
Yeah, since we came to the subject of permitting, Dorian's absolutely correct. I would say that your forest practices forester for your area is similar to me in terms of working with small landowners as your log buyer. They are interested in helping you get your project going and getting it done. And they won't help you a whole lot, but the DNR has if people are not aware of it, they have what they call the small landowner office. You can find that either on their website or call. And so DNR is structured now to actually help small landowners through the process. They have foresters that can come out, advise you, guide you through the paperwork process if need be, and help you get your approval to do your project.
Yeah, actually, one of them was on at the beginning of the talk here, Matt Provencher.
Yeah, I saw him leave.
There's not very many across the state, and they're in pretty high demand, but they're typically really wonderful to deal with, and very helpful in trying to work you through the system. But I think that there's a whole big possibility here that I hadn't even actually thought about before, Dan. So I just want to thank you for sort of opening my eyes to this idea that I could sort of peck away. Now I need to know, how big of a machine do I need? Because I have a dinky toy for a tractor.
Well, so when I started out, I'll just share my story. When I started out, I logged with a 14 horsepower Kubota tractor to start, and that really wasn't doing much for me. But I played around with that and actually sold several loads of logs to Mankeys. And then I bought a quad, and I was riding that quad around, and I ended up buying one of the Future Forestry products, Mark Havel's hand-operated winch that tows behind an ATV or a small tractor. And I logged another mini loads of smaller diameter stuff. I could actually log up to 8-inch diameter long logs, 8 or 9-inch long logs with that thing. And I logged many more loads just with a quad and a little hand arch. And then I decided that what I really wanted to do was log, and I didn't want to mess around. So I finally bought an old skidder, and I've had 2 of them now. And I really believe that's the way to go for me. I've been more than pleased with just having a decent log skidder around. So, but you can move log. You can move an amazing size log with a wheel tractor, with a winch or a drawbar. Any way you can lift one into the log a bit and get it moving. You'd have to experiment around and play around, but it doesn't take a lot of machinery to slowly do your own thing.
And they make a farmy winch too for the attachment for the back of the tractor. That's what I use. I've gotten, 30 loads with one of those over the years.
Yep. I see a couple comments coming in. Someone says they're making their own arch right now to use behind their 32 horsepower John Deere. I personally don't have any experience with the 3-point attached winches, but there's a ton of them out there. Someone says they have a Farmy winch. I see that they use on a Ford tractor. Farmy is a big name in those winches. And I'll just do a sales pitch. I'm a member of the Olympic chapter of Washington Farm Forestry, and our president, Dick Alicio, has patented his own controls version of a tractor mounted winch that's available. So it's similar to the winches in looks, but the control system, the operating system on it is something that he has invented different, that he thinks operates better than the others, and he actually has a patent on his process now. There's a local guy selling winches, and there's all kinds of big time commercial ones.
And Dick's, by the way, he advertised in the last Northwest Woodlands. So check out that ad in the Northwest Woodlands and he will love to tell you about it.
Yep.
Well, that's really inspiring because I have a Kubota BX24. So if you could move it with a 14 horsepower tractor, maybe I'll try my 24 horsepower and see how we get on.
Yep. And I just want to mention a couple more things, but one thing, the last slide I'd made up was something that I wanted to go ahead and share not only in terms of this log marketing thing for small landowners, but just anything, any subject you can think of where you might want to learn some good information about your tree farm and the processes on the tree farm. Right on our Washington Farm Forestry homepage, down near the bottom, but it's easy to find right down near the bottom, is basically an entire book built by chapters that Brian Laux has put together and published there. And I've been going through that lately, kind of scrolling through and reading, and he's put a tremendous amount of effort and good information into that thing. So I think anyone that's on any subject, you can go in there and search by subject or by chapter. And he has a log marketing section in there, but I mean, anything from A to Z on your tree farm, there's good information available right there on our Washington Farm Forestry homepage.